A company doesn't usually collapse because someone steals $1 million. It goes down because someone made a tiny decision, then another, just small compromises, one after the other, until the foundation is gone. It happens more often than you think, and it's precisely what corporate governance aims to prevent. Welcome back to Part 4 of Unit 8 of BUS 3306, Business and Society. Daniel, we've spent a lot of time discussing ethics, leadership, and codes of conduct, but today we're diving into something that often feels like a behind-the-scenes mechanism, yet it underpins everything we've talked about: corporate governance. That's right, William. Corporate governance sounds like a term plucked straight from a textbook, reserved for the biggest corporations, but it's actually fundamental to any organization's health, regardless of size. My working definition for our listeners is simple. Corporate governance is the system that ensures an organization is directed, controlled, and held accountable. It's the framework that keeps everyone aligned. So it's not just a set of dusty rules then. It's about how decisions are made, approved, and monitored, who holds the power, and who gets held responsible.
Exactly. Think of it as answering those critical questions. Who makes the big decisions? Who signs off on them? Who keeps an eye on management? How do we ensure leaders are truly accountable? And crucially, how do we protect our stakeholders? It really transcends mere compliance. It's about establishing a reliable operating system for the entire enterprise.
That makes sense. It's about designing a structure where good intentions can actually translate into good actions and outcomes. But let's clarify for a moment. If I'm running a small business, maybe just a dozen employees, does corporate governance still apply to me? Or is this really for multinational giants?
Absolutely, it applies. Perhaps not with the same formal structures as a Fortune 500 company, but the principles are identical. Imagine your small business starts growing rapidly. You can't personally oversee every single decision anymore. You hire managers. How do you ensure those managers are acting in the company's best interest? How do you prevent misuse of resources or ensure your financial reports are accurate? Even for a small investor, how do you protect their stake?
So it's about scaling trust and oversight as personal supervision becomes impossible.
Precisely. The moment you delegate authority, you need a system to ensure that authority is exercised responsibly. Padmavati, Venkatraghav, and Venkatesh, in their 2025 research, highlight that strong corporate governance improves transparency, accountability, ethical behavior, and stakeholder confidence. These are not concepts exclusive to large corporations. They're vital for sustainable performance at any scale.
That's a powerful connection. It bridges directly to our previous discussions on ethics. So if ethics provides the values, corporate governance provides the structure to uphold those values. Am I understanding that correctly?
You've hit on the core distinction. Ethics tells people what is right, what the moral compass points to. Governance creates the systems and processes that make doing the right thing more likely and doing the wrong thing more difficult or detectable. Both are necessary. You can have the most ethical individuals, but if your systems are flawed, they can still be led astray or unable to prevent issues.
So at its core, corporate governance isn't just a regulatory burden, but a practical necessity for any growing organization to maintain its integrity and performance. It's the operationalization of ethical intent.
A perfect way to put it, William. It's about moving from abstract principles to concrete, actionable practices.
Let's take a concrete example. The lecture mentions a finance manager who can approve payments without review. That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. Is the solution simply hire more honest people?
Not at all. Good governance operates under the realistic assumption that mistakes and temptations are part of the human condition. It's not about distrusting every employee, but about building resilience into the system. For that finance manager, strong governance might require 2 approvals for large payments, independent financial audits, regular reporting, and a clear separation of duties.
So less about moral policing and more about intelligent design.
Exactly. These procedures protect the organization from potential fraud or error, but they also protect the employees themselves. It removes undue pressure and the opportunity for that one-time decisions to spiral out of control. It's a safeguard for everyone involved.
I can see the benefit in theory, but I also imagine some pushback. For a fast-moving startup, for instance, isn't this kind of layered approval and oversight just bureaucracy that slows things down? Does robust governance inevitably mean sacrificing agility?
That's a very fair question, and it's a common tension point. The key is to design governance that is appropriate for the organization's size and complexity. For a startup, it might be simpler checks and balances, clearly defined roles, and transparent communication. As the organization grows, the systems evolve. The goal isn't to create red tape, but to create intelligent guardrails. A small delay in a payment approval is a tiny price to pay compared to the cost of a financial scandal or a major error that could sink the company.
So it's about finding the right balance between control and flow, rather than an either-or. It sounds like a proactive investment in long-term stability and integrity.
Absolutely. It's preventative medicine for organizational health.
Moving on, another critical component of good governance is accountability. How does the system ensure that every decision has ownership and that consequences follow actions, both good and bad?
Accountability is non-negotiable. It means that if something goes wrong, you can trace it back. Who made the decision? What information did they have at the time? Were policies followed? Could this have been prevented? Without that clear line of ownership, mistakes get swept under the rug, blame gets tossed around, and the organization never truly learns or improves. It's essential for a culture of continuous learning and responsible action.
And this directly ties into transparency, right? The readings emphasize communicating honestly with stakeholders. Does transparency mean showing everyone everything, or is there a strategic element to it?
It's definitely not about revealing confidential information willy-nilly. It means communicating truthfully and openly with the relevant stakeholders. Employees deserve accurate information about their work environment and the company's direction. Investors need truthful financial reports to make informed decisions. Customers deserve honest marketing and safe products. Communities deserve to know about responsible environmental practices. When that transparency disappears, trust almost inevitably follows it out the door.
What this really changes is our understanding of doing the right thing. It's not just a moral imperative, but a structural one. It's about designing an organization where honesty and responsibility are built into the very operational DNA, rather than relying solely on individual willpower.
Precisely, William. It elevates ethical behavior from a personal choice to an institutional expectation, supported by clear mechanisms.
We often hear about these spectacular business failures, the ones that dominate headlines, but the lecture makes a really interesting point. Unethical behavior rarely starts with one huge decision. It's a slow burn, beginning with small compromises. Can you elaborate on this slippery slope?
This is a critical insight. Think about it. A manager ignores a policy because a deadline is looming. Another tweaks a small financial figure, justifying it as just this once to meet quarterly targets. Someone overlooks a conflict of interest because the person involved is a key player. Each incident in isolation might seem insignificant, but they erode the ethical fabric of the organization bit by bit.
And the cumulative effect, then, is this normalization of deviance?
Exactly. Eventually, employees start to believe these behaviors are normal, even expected, the way things are done here. And that's when an organization becomes incredibly vulnerable to major scandals. The Enrons and Wells Fargos of the world didn't fall overnight. They were undermined by a multitude of small, seemingly inconsequential decisions that collectively created a toxic culture.
So it's not a single bad apple, but the barrel itself that gets slowly tainted. That leads me to another point raised. Ethical failures usually reveal weaknesses in systems rather than simply weaknesses in individuals. This feels like a nuanced take because we often default to blaming individuals.
It is nuanced, and it's essential to understand. Of course, individuals are responsible for their own actions. We're not absolving anyone of personal accountability. However, organizations also have a profound responsibility to create environments that encourage ethical behavior and actively discourage shortcuts. If the system implicitly or explicitly rewards unethical means to achieve results, it's setting people up to fail.
But isn't there a risk here of shifting all blame from the person who actually commits the unethical act to some abstract system? Don't we lose something by not holding individuals accountable more firmly?
That's a valid concern, William, and it's not about absolving individuals entirely. It's about recognizing that individual choices happen within a context. If the system tolerates or even incentivizes unethical behavior, it becomes much harder for even well-intentioned individuals to resist. The problem often isn't just a lack of moral fiber in one person, but a lack of structural support for ethical conduct throughout the organization. Blaming only the individual means we never fix the underlying systemic issues, and the problem simply recurs with new players.
I see. So it's about understanding the whole causal chain, not just the last link. If leadership, as we discussed in Part 2, rewards results without scrutinizing how those results were achieved, then employees receive a very clear and dangerous message.
Precisely. That message is, performance matters, ethics doesn't, and a business might appear successful for a while. Sales go up, profits grow, investors cheer. But if that success is built on dishonesty, misleading customers, unsafe products, or manipulated financials, the long-term consequences are usually devastating. Reputation suffers, customers flee, employees become demoralized, investors withdraw, and regulators step in. Recovery can take years if it happens at all.
This really underscores the idea that leadership's incentives shape the very ethical landscape of the organization. If the how isn't explicitly valued and monitored, then the what can become dangerously corrupted.
Absolutely. It sets the tone, the expectation, and ultimately the reality for every employee.
So instead of asking, how do we recover after an ethical failure, ethical organizations should be asking, how do we prevent them from happening in the first place? What does that preventative approach look like in terms of governance?
It's multifaceted. It involves establishing clear ethical policies, but critically, also independent oversight. Regular ethics training isn't just a box-ticking exercise. It needs to be meaningful. Confidential reporting channels are essential so employees have a safe avenue to raise concerns. Then, fair investigations and consistent disciplinary procedures are vital, coupled with leadership accountability. These systems reduce opportunities for unethical behavior and, just as importantly, encourage employees to speak up early.
That phrase, encourage employees to speak up early, brings us to psychological safety. The lecture stresses that employees should never feel punished for doing so. This seems incredibly difficult to achieve in practice, given power dynamics within organizations.
It is difficult, but it's paramount. Imagine you notice safety procedures being ignored or a financial discrepancy. Would you report it if you feared it might affect your promotion, or worse, if your manager was involved? Many ethical crises escalate because employees are afraid to speak. Healthy organizations actively cultivate a culture where asking questions, reporting concerns, and challenging questionable decisions are not just tolerated, but encouraged without fear of retaliation.
So, psychological safety isn't just a nice-to-have for employee well-being, it's a critical component of risk management and organizational protection.
Precisely. It's a proactive defense mechanism. Those who silence employees often silence the very people who could have prevented serious problems from becoming catastrophic failures. It transforms potential whistleblowers from threats into valuable internal auditors and guardians of integrity.
But isn't it naive to think that every organization can truly foster that level of psychological safety? There's always going to be an element of self-preservation in the corporate world, isn't there? People protecting their jobs, their relationships, their careers.
It's certainly a challenge, William, and it requires continuous effort and commitment from the very top. It's not a switch you flip, but the alternative is far more dangerous. An organization where fear trumps truth is one living on borrowed time. The cost of silence when ethical issues are festering is almost always greater than the discomfort of confronting them early. It's about deciding whether you want to deal with small problems openly or massive scandals secretly until they explode. True leaders understand that a culture of fear doesn't eliminate problems, it just hides them.
That's a powerful way to frame it. So for our listeners, as future managers or business owners, the question really is, if one of your employees discovered an ethical problem tomorrow, would they feel comfortable bringing it to you?
That's the litmus test. If the answer is yes, you're building the right kind of culture, a resilient one. If the answer is no, then the problem is much bigger than any single ethical issue. It signals a fundamental breakdown in trust and safety, which will inevitably lead to larger, unseen problems down the line. It's an internal alarm system that you've effectively disabled.
It's a sobering thought, but an essential one. This conversation has really shifted my perception of corporate governance from a dry compliance issue to a dynamic living system that profoundly impacts an organization's ethical health and long-term sustainability.
I'm glad to hear that, William. And I want to leave our listeners with this final thought. Many people believe ethics becomes important only when something goes wrong. I actually think the opposite is true. Ethics matters most when everything appears to be going well, because that is exactly when leaders are tempted to become comfortable, ignore warning signs, or believe success excuses poor decisions. Strong governance reminds organizations that lasting success depends not only on achieving results, but on achieving them the right way.
That's a crucial distinction, Daniel. It's easy to be ethical when the stakes are low or when you're under scrutiny, but when the winds are rolling in and the pressure to maintain that success is intense, that's when true character, and by extension, true governance, is tested.
Absolutely. It's in those moments of prosperity that the foundations are either strengthened or slowly, almost imperceptibly weakened. And strong governance acts as that constant check, ensuring the pursuit of success remains aligned with integrity.
Thank you, Daniel. This has been an incredibly insightful discussion, tying together so many threads from our BUS 3306 course. We've explored how ethical values, leadership, and structured governance frameworks, like those outlined by Padmavati, Venkat Raghav, and Venkatesh, are not just separate concepts, but interconnected pillars of responsible business. It's been a pleasure, William. Understanding corporate governance is crucial for anyone looking to build or lead an organization that truly thrives, not just financially, but ethically and sustainably. It's about long-term value creation in the broadest sense. In our final part, we'll bring together everything we've learned throughout this entire course. We'll revisit the biggest lessons from business and society, connect ethics with CSR, sustainability, diversity, and stakeholder management, and discuss how these ideas apply to your career as a future manager, entrepreneur, or business leader. We'll see you in Part 5, where we'll conclude not only Unit 8, but the entire BUS 3306 Business and Society course.
If you found this discussion helpful, please consider sharing this episode with anyone who might benefit from understanding the foundational role of corporate governance in ethical business. Your support helps us continue creating valuable content.